With that, shaking himself clear of these considerations, he found the keys and advanced toward the open door of the shop. Outside it had begun to rain smartly, and the sound of the shower upon the roof had hung against the yellow panels of the wainscot. So loud was the beating of the rain through all the house that in Markheim's ears it began to be distinguished into many different sounds. Footsteps and sighs, the tread of regiments marching in the distance, the chink of money in the counting, and the creaking of doors held stealthily ajar, appeared to mingle with the patter of the drops upon the cupola and the gushing of the water in the pipes. The sense that he was not alone grew upon him to the verge of madness. On every side he was haunted and begirt by presences. He heard them moving in the upper chambers. From the shop he heard the dead man getting to his legs. Like some dripping cavern, the chambers of the house were haunted by an incessant echoing, which filled the ear and mingled with the ticking of the clocks. And as Markheim approached the door, he seemed to hear, in answer to his own cautious tread, the steps of another foot withdrawing up the stair. The shadow still palpitated loosely on the threshold. He threw a ton's weight of resolve upon his muscles, and drew back the door. The faint, foggy daylight glimmered dimly on the bare floor and stairs, on the bright suit of armor posted, halberd in hand, upon the landing, and on the dark wood carvings and framed pictures that hung against the yellow panels, and as he began with a great effort to mount the stairs, feet fled quietly before him, and followed stealthily behind. If he were but deaf, he thought, how tranquilly he would possess his soul. And then again, and hearkening with ever fresh attention, he blessed himself for that unresting sense which held the outposts and stood a trusty sentinel upon his life. His head turned continually on his neck, his eyes, which seemed starting from their orbits, scouted on every side, and on every side were half rewarded as with the tail of something nameless vanishing. The 24 steps to the first floor were 24 agonies. On that first story the doors stood ajar, 3 of them, like 3 ambushes, shaking his nerves like the throats of a cannon. He could never again, he felt, be sufficiently immured and fortified from men's observing eyes. He longed to be home, girt in by walls, buried among bedclothes, and invisible to all but God. And at that thought he wondered a little, recollecting tales of other murderers and the fear they were said to entertain of heavenly avengers. It was not so, at least, with him. He feared the laws of nature, lest in their callous and immutable procedure they should preserve some damning evidence of his crime. He feared tenfold more, with a slavish, superstitious terror, some scission in the continuity of man's experience, some wilful illegality of nature. He played a game of skill, depending on the rules, calculating consequence from cause. And what if nature, as the defeated tyrant, overthrew the chessboard, should break the mold of their succession? The like had befallen Napoleon, so writers said, when the winter changed the time of its appearance. The like might befall Markheim. The solid walls might become transparent and reveal his doings like those of bees in a glass hive. The stout planks might yield under his foot like quicksands, and detain him in their clutch. Ay, and there were soberer accidents that might destroy him. If, for instance, the house should fall and imprison him beside the body of his victim, or the house next door should fly on fire, and the firemen invade him from all sides. These things he feared, and, in a sense, these things might be called the hands of God reach forth against sin. But about God himself he was at ease. His act was doubtless exceptional, but so were his excuses, which God knew. It was there, and not among men, that he felt sure of justice. When he had got safe into the drawing-room, and shut the door behind him, he was aware of a respite from alarms. The room was quite dismantled, uncarpeted besides, and strewn with packing-cases and incongruous furniture. Several great pier-glasses, in which he beheld himself at various angles, like an actor on a stage. Many pictures, framed and unframed, standing with their faces to the wall. A fine Sheraton sideboard, a cabinet of marquetry, and a great old bed, with tapestry hangings. The The windows opened to the floor, but by great good fortune the lower part of the shutters had been closed, and this concealed him from the neighbors. Here, then, Markheim drew in a packing-case before the cabinet and began to search among the keys. It was a long business, for there were many, and it was irksome besides, for, after all, there might be nothing in the cabinet, and time was on the wing. But the closeness of the occupation sobered him. With the tail of his eye he saw the door, even glanced at it from time to time directly, like a besieged commander pleased to verify the good estate of his defences. But in truth he was at peace. The rain falling in the street sounded natural and pleasant. Presently, on the other side, the notes of a piano were wakened to the music of a hymn, and the voices of many children took up the air and words. How stately, how comfortable was the melody! How fresh the youthful voices! Markheim gave ear to it smilingly as he sorted out the keys, and his mind was thronged with answerable ideas and images. Church-going children and the pealing of the high organ. Children afield, bathers by the brookside, ramblers on the brambly common, kite-flyers in the windy and cloud-navigated sky. And then, at another cadence of the hymn, back again to church, and the somnolence of summer Sundays, and the high genteel voice of the parson, which he smiled a little to recall, and the painted Jacobean tombs, and the dim lettering of the 10 Commandments in the chancel. And as he sat thus, at once busy and absent, he was startled to his feet. A flash of ice, a flash of fire, a bursting gush of blood went over him, and then he stood transfixed and thrilling. A step mounted the stair slowly and steadily, and presently a hand was laid upon the knob, and the dim lettering of the 10 Commandments in the chancel. And the lock clicked, and the door opened. Fear held Markheim in a vice. What to expect he knew not, whether the dead man walking, or the official ministers of human justice, or some chance witness blindly stumbling in to consign him to the gallows. But when a face was thrust into the aperture, glancing round the room, looked at him, nodded and smiled as if in friendly recognition, and then withdrew again, and the door closed behind it, his fear broke loose from his control in a hoarse cry. At the sound of this, the visitant returned. "Did you call me?" he asked pleasantly, and with that he entered the room and closed the door behind him. Markheim stood and gazed at him with all his eyes. Perhaps there was a film upon his sight, but the outlines of the newcomer seemed to change and waver like those of the idols in the wavering candlelight of the shop. And at times he thought he knew him, and at times he thought he bore a likeness to himself. And always, like a lump of living terror, there laid in his bosom the conviction that this thing was not of the earth, and not of God. And yet the creature had a strange air of the commonplace, as he stood looking on Markheim with a smile, and when he added, "You are looking for the money, I believe," it was in the tones of everyday politeness. Markheim made no answer. "I should warn you," resumed the other, "that the maid has left her sweetheart earlier than usual and will soon be here. If Mr. Markheim be found in this house, I need not describe to him the consequences." "You know me?" cried the murderer. The visitor smiled. "You have long been a favorite of mine," he said, "and I have long observed and often sought to help you." "What are you?" cried Markheim. "The devil?" "What I may be," returned the other, "cannot affect the service I propose to render you." "It can," cried Markheim. "It does. Be helped by you? No, never. Not by you. You do not know me yet. Thank God, you do not know me." "I know you," replied the visitant, with a sort of kind severity, or rather firmness. "I know you to the soul." "Know me?" cried Markheim. "Who can do so? My life is but a travesty and slander on myself. I have lived to belie my nature. All men do. All men are better than this disguise that grows about and stifles them. You see each dragged away by life, like one whom bravos have seized and muffled in a cloak, If they had their own control, if you could see their faces, they would be altogether different. They would shine out for heroes and saints. I am worse than most. Myself is more overlaid. My excuse is known to me and God, but had I the time, I could disclose myself. To me? Inquired the visitant. To you before all, returned the murderer. I supposed you were intelligent. I thought, since you exist, you would prove a reader of the heart. And yet you would propose to judge me by my acts? Think of it, my acts. I was born and I have lived in a land of giants. Giants have dragged me by the wrists since I was born out of my mother, the giants of circumstance. And you would judge me by my acts? But can you not look within? Can you not understand that evil is hateful to me? Can you not see within me the clear writing of conscience, never blurred by any willful sophistry, although too often disregarded? Can you not read me for a thing that surely must be common as humanity, the unwilling sinner? All this is very feelingly expressed, was the reply, but it regards me not. These points of consistency are beyond my province, and I care not in the least by what compulsion you may have been dragged away, so as you are but carried in the right direction. But time flies, the servant delays, looking in the faces of the crowd and at the pictures on the hoardings, but still she keeps moving nearer, and remember, it is as if the gallows itself was striding towards you through the Christmas streets. Shall I help you? I, who know all? Shall I tell you where to find the money? For what price? Asked Markheim. I offer you the service for a Christmas gift, returned the other.